So now we will recite the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. Yes, Kate?
I have a quick question first. What did you say again that the Sugramati requested sutra was for?
It's for a purification for the teaching, for the teacher, and for the recipients, for the students,
Okay.
to purify themselves. So the language in the prayer is very simple, and it's something that is very good to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so let me see here. So now we will recite the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. This is something that we've been working on. And so this is something that we should do before we begin all our practices, all our teachings, all our studies when we are at home by ourselves. And this is part of our daily practice. So this is very powerful to recite this. So I'm going to screen share this in case you don't have it, but you should have a copy of it. You can print this if you need it. I can send you the file if you haven't gotten it before. So we begin with the first page, which is the precious human life. So we recite this together, and at the conclusion, we contemplate. The freedoms and advantages so extremely difficult to obtain accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? Ho, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When one obtains a body which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to attain ultimate liberation, joyous result. So contemplate the meaning of this. You may read this quietly to yourself. You may reflect on the notes when we talked about this particular prayer a couple of weeks ago. Precious human life. This has been the focus of our talks these past number of weeks. Okay. We go to the second prayer, which is the impermanence. And this is 2 pages, second and third pages. Ka, no matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? In the certainty of death, and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or a dance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky, like water falling from a steep mountain cliff. It departs quickly, quickly. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend any time, like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. Please contemplate the meaning of this prayer. Read it quietly to yourself. See how you relate to it. What questions you have about it. Okay. Now we go to the next prayer, which is the suffering of samsara. Consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. In the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. Contemplate the meaning of this. This will be the subject of our talk tonight, this particular prayer. But read this, contemplate the meaning of this as it is to you now. Okay. We go to the fourth. Karma, cause, and result. Even if one were a king at the time of death, one's possessions, enjoyments, friends, and retinue will not follow. But wherever that sentient being goes, his karma follows after him like a shadow. The fruit of one's positive karma is happiness. Suffering is the fruit of negative karma. The inexorable karmic causation is the mode of abiding in all dharmas. Henceforth, practice the Dharma by distinguishing what should be practiced and what should be given up. So contemplate the meaning of this. This will be the topic that we will explore next week. But read this, understand this as best as you can, and develop whatever understandings and questions you might have. Karma, cause, and result. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything about the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, about our opening prayers, anything thus far?
I just wanted to make a passing comment. I appreciate you taking the time to have us build that into the practice, like as an experience, because that's really helpful. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. As I said earlier, we're going to start developing the stages of meditation. So the opening prayers is the first step. Then this prayer, that this four thoughts that turn the mind, is the second step. And then after that comes bodhicitta and other things. So we're going to be touching on all those things. So this is an integral part of our daily practice, along with the opening prayers, etc. So that's what we're doing, is building the stages of meditation for ourselves. And these are the same stages of meditation that all the monastics use, that the Dalai Lama uses, that Gotchen Rinpoche uses to go through this process.
Lance, I wanted to clarify just for myself procedurally. So as you're kind of modeling us through this 101. So it's the reading of the prayers is step one, then contemplate the four thoughts, and then you go into, is that actually the meditation? Like, is that the beginning? And I'm delineating it as like a technical term, but also the practice of it. Is that as you start the reading of the prayers, are you in meditation at that point? like an intentional meditation. I know the idea of living meditation, and that's like what we're aspiring to moment, but from like this, like the actual prescription of practice, is that the technical start of it?
Well, yeah, you're cultivating it,
Okay.
and it begins by the outer meaning, and we're
Mhm.
reading the outer meaning. But then, as we read it and as we contemplate it, then we delve into the inner meaning, and then as we delve into that, as we have experience with that, we develop our own personal experience with that, and that's the secret meaning. How it is that how this affected us yesterday when we were talking to somebody or while we were driving in traffic. So we find the living examples of these things, which all become the secret meaning. So yes, so that's the whole point is, and sometimes we just, slide right through these things very quickly, but sometimes even the most experienced practitioner will read one of these and it'll give them cause to just contemplate or meditate for the next hour and a half. They'll just stay right with that because they open up a door that they hadn't otherwise opened. Okay, so thank you for the question. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Yes. So, okay. All right. So then I'm going to screen share and go back to what we were talking. Oh, before I do, I want to mention one thing, and that is we've said many times this the transformation of suffering book. And this is the new cover. There's the first edition had a solid blue color, but this cover, this one has an illustration on here, which is interesting to look at. If you have this copy and you look at that, you might find that to be a meditation all by itself. But the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma is explained in here by Kenshin Rinpoche.
Mhm.
Kenshin Rinpoche is magnificent. He is the translator of most all these texts that we use in the Drikung Kagyu here in America. He came to America in 1982, and his first Dharma work was to get these texts in the hands of the Americans by translating what were just in Tibetan into the English. So he enlisted, so many capable people to help him in Washington D.C. when he first came, and so the Jewel Ornamental Liberation is perhaps his greatest work was to translate that was in Tibetan into English for us. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or excuse me, the Jewel Ornamental Liberation is the complete teaching of Gampopa. And Kenshin translated it line by line, word by word. So, and he did not embellish it. The embellishment is in the introduction when he goes and he gives his personal comments on each of the sections of the book. But the actual text of the book is as Gampopa wrote it down. And so it's very, very powerful. And um, so I hope that you all have the ability to get these two books and maybe some of the other books. If you have questions about the books, I'll be more than glad to answer what I can for you.
Lance, today I spoke to the publisher, the Vajra Publications, the one you directed for them. She called me on the phone because I've ordered several copies to hand out, and she actually, I think she knew who you were.
Yeah,
It was,
Linda
yeah,
Wurstenberg, yes.
yeah, she was very, very sweet. She asked who I was getting instruction from, or and I mentioned you, so that was really sweet. A couple hours ago, it's really sweet.
Well, good, yes. Yeah, it's wonderful to be part of that lineage of the Sangha and so on like that. And it's gotten very broad, where physically it's gone all around the country, all around the world. So yes, it's really great. Many of these books have also been translated in German and in Spanish and other languages, Vietnamese. So there's a lot of movement in that direction. Okay. So, so just to go back to say that Kenshin's descriptions that are in these books and everything are very detailed and much more than we can do in these short periods of time that we have. Plus, his knowledge of depth of knowledge of this is so powerful that he gives so many other little anecdotal stories about this and so on that are worth the read, absolutely, and to read them over and over again. Yes, Alex, I see you got your hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to share my kind of thoughts as we were doing this, and it kind of remind me what I'm doing when I'm as a scientist coming to the lab, and first I'm thinking like why, like what I'm gonna do, what I'm going to do it today, and like, well, I know there is some kind of problem in the world that I need to solve, or a disease, and then like what do I have with me, what all this equipment that I have, that's kind of my advantage of being in that particular position. And then I have to remind myself like what kind of laws of nature do I use to solve this problem. Maybe I need to look up some formulas, or read like papers that somebody done before me on to clarify what are these laws of cause and effect, and then start and then developing motivation like, well, okay, we're gonna go through some obstacles, but what are we like, what kind of great data we're gonna get, and how we're gonna advance the science. And I think that is very similar to what we do in our life. Our life is like a big experiment. We just sometimes not quite sure what it is all about, but gradually we sort of figuring it out. And once we figure it out, once in a while, we still need to remind ourselves what are we doing here, and how we're going to achieve our goals, and all that.
Yes, thank you very much. So the questions are what, why, and how. And Alex is the head of the laboratory, a neuroscience laboratory that is part of Johns Hopkins Hospital on their campus here in Baltimore. And so his work is very good, and it's on the cutting edge of learning, the practicality of what the mind is. But there's this threshold where having spirituality awareness is imperative, for those of us who have experienced this, who realize that, because there's some things that can't be discovered in the laboratory in that way, in a physical way. But yet the principles of the investigation can be applied to the science, to the spirituality, and that's really fascinating. That's really what the Dharma is applying that system of investigation as a scientific investigation. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so now going to this. So we go back. Okay, so the suffering of samsara is what we're going to talk about tonight. The suffering of samsara. Samsara is this ocean of suffering, we call this ocean of suffering. And this ocean of suffering is samsara. So we think of it as more huge than anything, the whole entire universe, all this phenomenal nature, all this physical nature, all this intellectual consciousness and so on is all part of samsara. And the other side of the samsara is nirvana. It's two sides of the same hand. There is a dualism of samsara and nirvana. It is an intellectual, conceptual convention that we are agreeing upon in order that we can intellectualize what's going on. However, the true nature of the awareness is beyond the duality. So we need to understand that which we can, this phenomenal nature, intellectually as best as we can, so that by process of elimination, that's what we're doing. The process of elimination, we're saying, oh, this may be part of it, but it's not the totality of it. So by process of elimination, we're clearing away things. We're clearing away the obstacles. We're bringing them onto the path, so that the path is like the sunshine that is bringing awareness to what that darkness is, what that confusion is. So all of this we can call the suffering of samsara. So it doesn't have to be literally that we're sick in bed or something like that and suffering from some terrible disease, or we've been in an accident and suffering from something like that, some kind of bodily suffering, or some kind of an intellectual suffering that we're going through, or neuroses, or some kind of even psychosis or some terrible thing like that, or our spiritual not being able to recognize our spirituality and suffering our spirituality to be devoid of any sense of spirituality would be suffering. So by recognizing this, bringing this all onto the path, bringing the suffering onto the path of light, we are illuminating our wisdom. And with the wisdom comes the skillful means, comes the compassion to be able to help ourselves and to be able to help other beings. So this is why we are looking at this. So we say that the suffering of samsara, consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. So this is what we've been talking about on our Sunday meeting. We just started this first meeting on this past Sunday, and it's available on YouTube if you missed it. But we're going into looking at that. And here is an illustration. This is a teaching illustration of what this samsara is. This is called the wheel of suffering, the wheel of samsara. And in this are the 6 human realms. So humans express themselves, humans experience their life in these 6 realms, and all 6 of them simultaneously. Sometimes we're 10% of this, sometimes 5% of that, sometimes 20% of this, etc. And it changes as we progress through our life. But this top portion here, this is called the human deva realm, the God realm, where humans think that they are like gods. They behave like gods. This over here is called the demigod realm, or the jealous God realm, or I call the titans, powerful human beings who have great skillful means but no wisdom, and they are manipulating beings. And over here, this is the human realm, who are caught in their desires to be in this totality, to be in this ocean of suffering altogether. And then over here is the animal realm, that sometimes human beings behave and think like animals. We are, after all, animals. We're mammals. We follow the same evolution as those beings, and we are animals. But have we been able to evolve ourselves bodily and mentally beyond just being animalistic? But sometimes we fall back and we behave animalistically. And then over here, this is called the hungry ghost realm. This is the realm of insatiable beings who always want more. Greed is their poison. They always want more, and they're never satisfied. And I think every one of us has a moment where we fall into this category. This is a very big category for us all. And then this one here at the bottom, this is the 18 hell realms. 18 hell realms, and we will go and explore these on our Sunday talks. And so these are the 8 cold hells and the 8 hot hells and the 4 neighboring hells that are bringing us to this, bringing us to realize this impenetrable suffering that we are going through all the time, or some beings are. And sometimes in our lives, we may be exposed to that ourselves. Either we were doing it directly or vicariously through the lives of others that we've read about, or that we've seen in movies, or we've seen on TV, or we've observed in some other way. So these realms here, this is the 6 human realms. And then this Mara, this demon here, is holding all this in his grasp. And this demon is our self. The self that we need to be able to illuminate, that we need to bring onto the path. In the darkness, this self, this Mara, is controlling us. This demon is controlling us, using our ego, using our desires, using our ignorance, using all these tools that the Mara has in order that we may remain a slave to our physical, to our intellectual selves, and not illuminating ourselves with our spirituality. So around the periphery of these 6 realms is the 12 links of interdependent origination. And we're going to explore these. These are the 6 links. This is like a sequential link that human beings go through in order to go through their cycle of life. The migration of going through a birth, going through the growth that they go through the sicknesses that they go through the death that they go through, and then the rebirth again, over and over again, in this wheel of samsara, this wheel of suffering. So this is what we are part of. This is what we are trying to liberate ourselves from. And we do that through the understanding of how this operates. And we liberate ourselves through the clarity that we develop, the Mahamudra of the nature of what this is, what our true essence is. Up here in this corner, I can't zoom it. Oh, maybe I can. Wait a minute. Up in this corner here is a Buddha. And a Buddha is an awakened one. So we have Buddha nature within us. We have that nature to awaken ourselves. But it's clouded up by this Mara, by all these things that are within this wheel of samsara. But when we can free ourselves, even for just a moment, have a moment of clarity, of meditation, we can recognize what this Buddha is pointing at over here. The Buddha is pointing at the Dharma wheel, is pointing at the 8-fold path of the Dharma. And it's through this Dharma, the Dharma teaching that came from the Buddha, that we can all recognize as ourselves. We can see this, we can employ this within ourselves. It's a system. And we say, I'm going to use this system in order to enlighten myself. So through this, the Buddha is pointing at this and saying, here is the method for the liberation from this ocean of samsara. So you can see that the Buddha is outside of the ocean of suffering. The Buddha is not bound up by the suffering of samsara. The Buddha has liberated himself, and this is the method by which he did that. So this is the gift that he has given to us. Does anybody have any questions about this? Pretty provocative, I'd say. Okay.
I have a question, Lance.
Yes.
Can you say any more? You're mentioning a little bit about this on Sunday, but on how we should be thinking about these 6 realms in the sense of, like, in what way do they exist or not exist? Are these literal places that people are being reborn into all these different hells or other ways of being, or trying to like, this is a place I got stuck up with on before when I was like practicing like Lamrim teachings, when they were getting into some of the stuff with the six realms and imagining the hells and everything. That kind of was tough for me. So anything you could say that could kind of help me as I'm trying to orient myself towards these like teachings.
There are those people who will think of these realms as being literal places. But these are people that are also thinking about that this spirituality is like a religion. And they haven't been able to understand that this is a self-awareness of one's own self, that it is the psychophysical drama of being a human being. Is there a hell out there that is below us? Is there a heaven that is above us or something like that? Well, it doesn't seem that way to us. There might be people who might say that, but to us, and even to the Buddha at the time, it's all within ourselves. This is our mental fabrication of what we are trying to understand. We've created this illustration like an artist does a painting. It's all symbolic. So we have to approach this as symbolic of the physical, psychophysical drama that we go through as human beings. So is it literal? The only thing that's literal about it, we can say about the human realm, because we're here in this, we can see each other and so on. And the animal realm, we can see all that and so on. And we are part of being an animal. I mean, those two are linked. So, but all the rest is just psychophysical drama that we create for ourselves. So the contemplation and the meditation is what really reveals that to us. When we start looking for these things, say, well, let me look for the hell realm. Let me look for the God realm. Let me look what it is to be the animal realm. And as you look in this and you go through the process of elimination, like I was saying before, and it's a logical thing. It's a logical thing. All this is based on logic. So it's not something that's pie in the sky. It's not something that you get to this mysterious part and you need the secret password to get through this veil of secrecy that only certain people get or something like that. When you are able to penetrate that by saying, oh, that didn't exist. That was only some fanciful folly that I bought into. It was only my own mental blockage that was keeping me from recognizing that. So it's letting go of everything. And that's what's really hard. That's why, because we like the fantasy. We like to know, oh, there's something substantial that all this is symbolic of. Because that freedom is just what it is, just what it says. It's free. It's free of anything. It's free of all physicality. It's free of any intellectualism, any intelligence. So, but it becomes pure spirit. And so now you got a question, well, is that the magical element here? Is that spirituality? Is that the magical thing? And the answer to that is, can you experience it? Do you want to experience it? Do you want to go through the instructions to follow to get to that point, to be able to see spirituality, to recognize spirituality? And maybe you got different names for it. Maybe it's the Godhead. Maybe it's the Buddha. Maybe it's the Christ. There's all different kinds of names for that spirituality. But once when we experience that, then we see that it's pure love. We come back from that experience saying it's pure love. So now you're invited to read all the different things that all the great experiencers have said about it, whether it was Jesus, whether it was Buddha, whether it was Mohammed, whether it was Krishna, it was whoever. You can read the books that they've left behind, and they all say the same thing. It's great, it's love, but I can't tell you anything more about it. You have to experience it yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lance.
I'm sorry I go on so long about these things.
That's really super helpful for me, actually. That was really good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Let me go back to this. So, who are the beings in this samsara? So are we talking about ourselves, or are we talking about other beings? Yes, we're talking about both. And when we contemplate that, doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. As we are mystified by what this 6 realms is, when we're hearing about this, it just brings this sense of awe to us. Awe, A-W-E, this great awe, wow, what is this? And associated, coming along with that can be this great fear and dread. Oh, you mean I got to deal with this myself? I'm reading all this, but my God, it means I got to, how can I do this? Can I do this in a month's time? Can I do this in a year's time? They're telling me I may not be able to do it in a lifetime, and that I've had lifetimes to get to where I am now. How does this happen? My goodness, what is this? So this great fear and dread arises in our heart for ourselves, but it also arises for other beings. If we're really being open, if we've understood the teachings of bodhicitta, and at maybe this level we really haven't had the experience of bodhicitta. We have vicariously been hearing about it in the prayers and what we've been saying in the Dharma teachings and so on, but we haven't experienced that bodhicitta yet. So we don't have the tools to be able to understand what that bodhicitta is and how do I explain that. Once we do, the fear and the dread begin to subside because we see that it's all empty. It's all just fabrication of the mind. And that's the craziest thing of it all, that we're all just inventing this. And that's what's really hard to understand. That's really hard to accept. So let me go to this next line here. So this is one of the prayers. This is and then this second part down here below this line is a second translation of the prayer. It says here, in the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there's not an instant of absolute happiness. So the 3 higher realms were the Deva realm, the Titan realm, and the human realm, as I was explaining in that wheel of samsara. Everybody remember that? The 3 lower realms were the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realms. Those are the 3 lower realms. So in the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, which are all still in samsara, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. In the human realm, it's very easy for us to be able to recognize we don't have absolute happiness. We see that everything changes, and we've come to accept it to one degree or another. And we'd like it to be better. We want to work to make it more perfect, but maybe there's folly in that. So in the 3 lower realms, the animal realm and the hungry ghost realm that is miserable from its insatiability, and the hell realms that are suffering from all the hatred and all the aggression that has caused them to be in those hells, that their life is threatened every single moment, and every moment they're dying, and then the next moment they're being revived. only to die again in the next moment from the same death over and over and over and over again. So in these three lower realms, even in the three higher ones, there's not an instant of absolute happiness. Even in the God realm, there's no positive, absolute permanence of their remaining as gods. These are human gods. These are beings who have acquired great knowledge, great wisdom, great ability to understand, but at some point, their life is going to come to an end. At some point, they are no longer going to be worshipped by those that consider them to be a god in the first place. They're a god by virtue of other people adoring them. And there's a point where those people turn away because they realize or there's a new god. There's something else that captures their attention. So that God is left. And then that God is left with the residue of all the action, all the karma that God could have taken in order to relieve the suffering of the beings that were beseeching him in their suffering. But that God was so absorbed with his own pleasure, didn't have the compassion to be able to recognize that and help those beings. So that God gets reborn. But where does he get reborn? He gets reborn in the lower realms because directly or indirectly was causing great suffering by not being able to actualize the wisdom that the God had. So we say, in the three lower realms, even the three higher ones, there's not an instant of absolute happiness that would be considered to be permanent. If it's absolute, it's permanent. It doesn't change. It's always there. And we're talking about a human being now. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence. So here I am. I'm born into this ocean of suffering. I accept this. I recognize this. This is what it is. Now I understand that I've been here this whole time and didn't realize it. You know, it's kind of like we say a fish. If you say to a fish, well, how do you like the water that you're swimming in? And the fish says, what water? So we're like in this ocean of suffering, and we don't even realize the suffering. We don't even realize all the painfulness and all the changes that we have to go through. We may be high on the evolutionary scale, but at some point we get sick. At some point we fall and we injure ourselves. At some point we die. And that die is inescapable. Just like our birth, just like the sickness, just like the injury that we go through, just like the old age that we go through, is all inescapable. So we're in this samsaric existence. We're in this ocean of suffering. How did I get here? I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence. Well, what was that? What's the root cause of my samsaric existence? I don't know. I know it's been brought down to 5 poisons. That we're here because of all these afflictions, all these emotions, all this ignorance, all this confusion is the result of what it is, that I'm here. This is the present condition of being here. But just exactly what those things were in terms of, well, in 1883, I shot somebody dead, and that's why I'm in this life now, or I did something really good for somebody in 1935. I did something really good for somebody, and that's why I have this really good life. We don't know that, but we don't have to know that. All that we need to do is to recognize where we are now, what good things we have, and what difficult things we have right now. And we have to bring them both onto the path and not attach ourselves or have aversion to either one of those things. It's just the state of our condition. It's the state of who we are. And so we avoid the root cause of our samsaric existence. We don't want to create more karma. We don't necessarily want to do the good things that is going to cause more attachment, that is going to cause more lifetime. Or can we find a satisfaction level where we don't need to keep creating things? We don't need to have more karma. We can just rest in the knowledge, in the state of our evolution as who we are as precious human beings. That we start off, remember this 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. The first one is a precious human being. That we abide in being a precious human being. And we don't need all this extra stuff. So I avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. That whatever I need to do to be peaceful, to be able to allow my heart to be completely open, my bodhicitta completely radiating like the sunshine, to be able to maintain that and not have to make excuses for having to, well, I had to lie to this person about this, that, and the other thing, and I had to, I was driving in my car and I ran over an animal or something like that, and well, that's the way it happens, and all these different rationalities that we use to be able to relieve our conscience of things that we know that we have done that was not what we would like to have done, our non-virtues, our unwholesomeness. Or can we practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment in this lifetime as we are? And that doesn't mean that we need to cut our hair and put on robes and live in a monastery. We don't have to do that. We can live exactly where we are, wear the same clothes that we're wearing, and experience the same work problems and family problems and so on as we're facing now. Like Faiza was talking about, that she's confronted with these things at work. We all have that, but we have to find a way to be able to look at those problems as a bodhisattva, a wholly enlightened being, as a Buddha. We're not going to be able to do it as a Buddha, but we can do it as a bodhisattva. The Buddha is perfectly stable in that view, in that conduct, but we don't have that. We could have it, but we have to go through the stages of being a practitioner, being a yogi or a yogini, or being a bodhisattva, to be able to get there, to perfect ourselves, to purify ourselves as a human being, to be able to get to a completely perfect, realized human being, which then would be called the Buddha. So we can do that now. And this system is the system we have in order to do that. If you say, you know what, I'd rather be a Christian. I'd rather do it as a Christian. I'd rather do it as a Hindu. I'd rather do it as a Jew. I'd rather do it as a Muslim. That's fine. There's a path for each one that takes you to the same place. The essence is the same of all those. The goal is the same. But for us in Buddhism, it's very well articulated. It's got a lot of support in a lot of different ways. So my observation of this has been that what I have found is that those who are very highly evolved in their physical, intellectual, and spiritual way are the ones who are ready to accept the responsibility that the Buddhism lays on them. The responsibility for their own perfection, the responsibility of their own liberation. So I find that it takes mature beings. It takes evolved beings. that's not to say that there's not a 5-year-old kid who is born with all this good karma to be able to recognize and take responsibility for himself. But for most of us, it's going to be somebody who's in their adult years, seniors or whatever. There will be younger beings, but it's the question of their maturity, a question of their evolution, a question of their karma, their spirituality awareness, and so on. So again, the Dharma is what's teaching us to recognizing us, to give us the tools to recognize this within ourselves and with other beings. And where it is where it is not very strong, where that recognition is weak, it teaches us how to cultivate that weakness to become stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's not punishing us in any way. It's just showing us how we can transcend our human nature, the ocean of suffering. So to practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. So in the beginning, this is a mental investigation. We have to contemplate this. We have to think about this. As I said before, we have to go through a process of elimination to say, oh, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Oh, this seems to be a logical path that I can follow. Let me follow that. And I may get to some point and find out, oh, no, there's some ego there. This path isn't what I thought it was. This church or this group isn't exactly where I thought it was be. They took me up to this level, but then I saw their ego games. I saw their psychophysical drama. But this group over here, they seem to be devoid of that. Let me shift gears and go over to that group. So we can make changes. So we need to contemplate. We need to be able to do that. And then finally, the contemplation stops. We just rest. We exhaust it. And then we have that moment, however long that can be, of the bliss of the meditative experience, of the experience of nirvana, the experience of true nature being awakened. And we begin to see everything now in a clear light, in a different light. And we may not be able to hold that view for very long. We come back into our ordinary consciousness, but we bring that love back with us. We bring that compassion back with us. We bring that joy back with us. We bring that sense of equanimity back with us. In other words, we bring that bodhicitta back with us. And once we get that, nothing can ever take it away. We can block it up. We can get back to that. But knowing that, we can also clean it back up again and let the bodhicitta shine through. So in this samsara, this suffering can be so insidious that we can get attached to our happiness. And what is the happiness? Our family, our clothes, our work, our possessions, our job, but invariably those things are going to change. The kids are going to grow up and move out of the house. Things are going to happen. People are going to get sick. Things are going to change at work. They're going to say, oh, well, anybody over 55 years old, we're going to have to lay off to make room for the younger people to come in. But you still got years to go before you can start collecting Social Security or something, So all these things are still going to happen, the things that were making you so happy for some point in time. Anybody got any questions or comments about this?
Yeah, I do, Lance.
Okay.
So there's a philosopher I like a lot named Arthur Schopenhauer, and he was a fan of Hinduism and Buddhism, and he talks about life existence being a lot of boredom punctuated by moments of extreme terror, which sounds to me a lot like samsara. I think he had a fairly good view of understanding of samsara for a Westerner in the 19th century. Gary, where Gary and I live, there's this whole street called Route 29 between Centerville and Fairfax City, where they have deforested and decapitated about 5 miles worth of trees. You know where I mean, right, Gary? It's pretty sad to expand a road. So an example of how things change, always change is constant and often not for the better. That's an example. So my question is, how do we escape samsara? And what I mean by that is, I know that through meditation and perspective, I can tell you that my ego has gone down over the years, which really helps me become more enlightened. I'm certainly not enlightened yet, but there are always fears, right? Like you mentioned, the fear of loss of a job, and what'll happen if, will my family be destitute? Can I keep providing for them? That's a fear. I know that during the Cultural Revolution, some Buddhist monks were tortured horribly, some with electricity, and some of them were able to forgive the Chinese soldiers that did that. Some of them had a harder time with that. So these threats to our, the psychological threats I can deal with, but it's these threats to our existential survival, our food, clothing, shelter, and safety, and the possibility of these things happening. This can someone become so enlightened that they could not even worry about their own personal physical security and ability to eat? That's my question.
Well, sure. And there's many stories about things like that and in the prayers and in the practices, it talks about that you are going to engage in the Dharma with no concern for your own life. That's how much dedication, that's how much devotion you have, that you will sacrifice your own life not to bring harm or to help other beings to survive at the risk of your own life. And that's a big ask, isn't it? But
Yes.
but think about, if someone comes into your home or it's easy to rationalize there that you're going to defend your home and your family, and that you would want to take the life of somebody who is threatening your life or your family or your possessions or something. You would take their life, but then consider you're carrying that with you for the rest of your life. You may shoot them, you may kill them, but now you're carrying that. You have that karma, regardless of what your rationale was, because you thought that your life was more important than their life. So we think that we have permission to take somebody else's life because of that. My life is more important. But if, say, you die in the process, say one of these shooters who goes into a store, goes into a church, or goes into a school or something like that, and you are lunging at that person to try and protect the other people that are behind you, that you're ready to sacrifice your life to put that shooter down, what do you think happens? They may shoot you, your body's gone, your intellectualism is gone, but where is your spirit? What happened to that? Was that act of trying to save other beings, was that a spiritual act for the benefit of other beings? And though we may have died in the process of trying to do that, wouldn't you think that that's a great karmic experience? Something that would have the result of great, powerful karma on the other side of that? But do you think that being thought to themselves, oh, I'm going to lunge at this guy, I'm going to try and take his gun away, and if he kills me, well, I'm just going to be born as a bodhisattva right away, or something like that? I don't think anybody's thinking that kind of a thought. but we need to be able to see that our life is temporary. And that if we create this false idea that we are better than other beings, is leading us down a path of unwholesomeness. That's non-virtue. And it's a difficult thing to do. I understand that. But yet, that's what we have to look at. We have to say that all this is temporary. At the essence, the way that we reconcile all of this is that all this is temporary. All this is an illusion. All this is relative. All this phenomenal nature is just figments of our imagination that have said all these photons coming together in this pattern looks like this table. All these photons coming together looks like you. All this flesh and blood coming together looks like you and me. And we begin to see that all this stuff is just appearances to us. It's just our mind saying this is all these collections of things. But when you get down to if you keep separating, if you separate and separate and separate, and you take the tissues away, you take the bones away, you take the muscles away, you get down to the molecules, you get down to the atoms, you get down to the subatomic particles and so on, and you get down to the energy, what's left? So there's this emptiness. So we say that the fundamental thing is that all this phenomenal nature is emptiness. It's empty of its own nature. It's all just fabricated stuff that our mind has created for ourselves, and we say it's real. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not pain. If you're going to be going after that shooter and that shooter shoots you, yeah, there might be some pain. But is it going to be a pain that we have to endure in order for the virtue to be able to rise to the surface, if I can use that expression? Kate, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to comment that this is a good reason to develop relationships with meditation teachers, lamas, or other spiritual experts, because there are also specific remedies for different issues, different poisons, right? There's the 84,000 emotions, and I suppose there's remedies for all of them. And I was thinking specifically for this one, monk and meditation teacher told me once that meditating on the Buddha is a remedy for fear of death, because if we meditate on the Buddha, we gain confidence in his teachings, and we understand death isn't an end in the way that we think it is. It's either, we're going to go on and live another life, or perhaps we're going to be liberated at that time and achieve something even better. Of course, that's a remedy that's only going to work for Buddhists. So people of other faiths might want to turn to their clergyman, their rabbi, or whatever. But definitely there are tools in addition to the general teachings.
Brendan, have you ever seen the documentary For the Benefit of All Beings?
Yes,
Garchen Rinpoche's one.
Yep.
It was making me think of it when you were talking about it. Might be worth checking out if you're interested. That's what got me ultimately interested in finding out about this center, because I'm such a big admirer of Garchen Rinpoche. I think it's on YouTube actually, somewhere you can find it. But it talks a lot about his experience, obviously, with it's called genocide, really, in Tibet, and then he was a prisoner of the Tibetans, and what his experience was like there, and then initially the anger and how he was practicing through it. It was it's really inspiring and pretty cool if you're interested, or anyone else was interested.
Yeah. Brenda, did you see that with us when we showed that on Zoom last year?
The one that I saw was maybe the same one. They had the Taoist, and they had different They had a Catholic, they had different religious leaders, and they were talking about, oh, I can't remember the name. Is it the same one Matthew's describing?
Now, that was the movie called One.
One, that's the one I'm talking about. Yes.
Yes, no, this is the what he's talking about is for the benefit of all beings is a biography of Garchen Rinpoche.
Okay.
So Garchen Rinpoche is our, the head of our Buddhist tradition here in the United States in particular. There's other people. There's a bit of a hierarchy, and we don't have to go into that, but he is considered in Tibet and many other places around the world to be a living Buddha.
Yeah, I think of him like that myself, to be honest.
So, I mean, he's
I've
not
never
just a
been.
bodhisattva, he is a living Buddha. So, this film, kind of tries to capture that message and be able to show us that message and so on. But by reading his biography, and there's a number of books that we have at Dharma Surya that you can read about his life. There's 3 volumes of his early life, his middle life, and his later life, and so on. And simply amazing, very inspiring. Absolutely. And there's been many, 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 many Buddhas since the time of Shakyamuni Buddha. All the statues that are in the shrine room at Dharma Surya, there's 1,000 Buddhas there. And they represent the Buddhas that will have life or whatever during the time of the teaching of the Dharma. Shakyamuni Buddha and so on. So whether it's 1,000 or it's 10,000 or it's 100,000, many, many, many Buddhas. So and we all have that potential within ourselves, and we can. And even if it's 50%, even if it's 20%, if it's 5%, is it worth letting that 5% come up and out? Rather than keeping it suppressed within ourselves. So whatever work we can do to open that up, to recognize that Buddha nature within ourselves is what we can do.
Thank you.
So we don't have a whole lot of time, but I do want to get a couple things out, and we can talk more because this will spark some more conversation, I'm sure. So, what are the 4 causes of samsara? So this is worth writing down. The 4 causes of samsara. And we've been over this before when we talked about in our dedication prayers in our book. If you go to page 21, the dedication prayer by Jigden Sumgun, Lord Jigden Sumgun, it says in the 3rd stanza there, as it's written in this book, it says, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. So here's the definition of those 4 causes of samsara. We gave it to you before, but that was a while ago, so it bears repeating. So what are these? So the first cause is not accumulating wisdom and compassion, or wisdom and merit, loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness and wisdom are the same thing, different ways of expressing the same thing. Knowledge, being able to express the knowledge and so on, being able to understand what's going on, to recognize this emptiness, etc. And the compassion is the sharing that, is being able to have the skillful means in which that wisdom, that loving kindness is actualized for the benefit of others. And that's the compassion. So there's loving kindness and compassion. There's wisdom and there's method or skillful means, being able to actualize that. So if we don't do that, that's a recipe for samsara. The second one is if we accumulate non-virtue, if we go around doing negative things. And a number of weeks ago and a couple months ago or so, we talked about the 10 virtues and the 10 non-virtues. And that was the card that Zara was holding up when we first started tonight. That list the 10 virtues and the 10 non-virtues. And if we are practicing the 10 non-virtues, then we're bound to be reborn in the ocean of samsara. And depending on what combination of non-virtues we do will be part of how it is that what kind of a human being we become in those 6 realms. How much of a hell being we be, how much of a hungry ghost we become, how much of an animal, how much of a god, how much of a demigod, etc. So by accumulating non-virtues rather than virtues is a recipe for birth in samsara. Now, the next one, the third one is being an obstacle to others people's virtue. If we are standing in the way of other people to be able to recognize their work that they need to do, either as a bodhisattva or as an ordinary human being, if we stand in their way of their spiritual development, is a recipe for us to be reborn again in samsara. And then the fourth one is not dedicating virtue. This is really easy to forget. We do so many things all day long. Chores that we're doing at work, chores we're doing at home, things we're doing with our family and friends and so on like that. And we're doing lots of good things. And if we're not mindful that we are that connected eternal knot, that right livelihood that we were talking about yesterday when we were talking about the Eightfold Path. And if we're not mindful of that interconnection and we're not dedicating the merit that we have gained by doing all those good deeds for our friends, for our family, for the people at work, people in general, all those things. If we're not mindful of dedicating that, we're just letting it slip through the cracks, so to speak. It's kind of like, going to the bank and getting some money out of the ATM or something and putting it into our pocket, but the pocket has a hole in it and all the money just slips right out. So all the good deeds is like money in that bank. It's like money being put into our pocket. But if it's not dedicated, then it just slips out. It slips away from us. So by dedicating virtue is what that means. The bottom line is dedicating virtue. If we don't dedicate the virtue, then that becomes part of the recipe for being reborn in samsara as an ordinary human being. So those 4 things, to become mindful of these things, what we're learning to do is to be a really moral person, a virtuous person, a wholesome person that has these ideals in their heart mind, that is not just an aspiration, it becomes our activity. In my body, speech, and mind, may I, with my body, speech, thus until I achieve enlightenment, with my body, speech, and mind, may I help all beings from death, until tomorrow, and it never comes. So we need to do that. That's the action bodhicitta. So the 4 causes of samsara. Anybody got a comment about that?
Yeah, I have a question actually. So if we're supposed to be dedicating virtue, what do? Every time we do a good deed in our lives, we stop and recite a dedication prayer?
This was my question too, Lance. I was thinking the same thing Kate was thinking, because I was going about my day. I'm constantly picking up trash and putting it in the garbage can, for example, on the street, like as a practical example, or opening a door for an old person, right, holding it. So I'm thinking could you guide us on what a practical way would be to handle that?
I think the Buddhists teach us how to do that through their mantras. So Om Mani Padme Hum is the most perfect of all the mantras, the most broad, that covers so many things. Om Mani Padme Hum, that we are sending out light from each of those syllables to all beings, that they may be liberated from their realm, whatever realm, human realm that they may be in. So if you're putting the trash in the trash can, if you're helping somebody carry their bag, whatever it is, and if you as you're doing it, or when you walk away, you go, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. So it doesn't require a whole prayer. It's just a mindfulness of that you are doing the activity of a Buddha, that you are benefiting other beings. And the more that we do that, the more aware we become of our purity and our non-purity. And if we miss the opportunity to dedicate, we forgive ourselves, we have compassion. But when we sit down and do a meditation, do our practice, at the end of the day, maybe part of what we do is we just kind of go through naturally the things that we did during the day, and just generally we're dedicating all those things that we did. But we have to remember the lies that we told. We have to remember the bad things that we did. We don't want to dedicate those. We have to ask for forgiveness of those things. We have to confess those things. Say, oh, I was good today, but I wasn't that good. These are the things that I did were good, and these are the things that I need to work on. So as they talk about in the Bardo Todal, when, it's a mindfulness thing, it's that when you are evaluating what's going to happen to you, how you're going to be reborn again, when you're in the bardo of becoming, and there's white pebbles and there's black pebbles, and you're going to have more white pebbles than you got black pebbles, and you can imagine where the white pebbles come from and where the black pebbles come from. So by starting to see that and incorporate that into your life now, white pebbles and black pebbles, you start purifying yourself now. You don't have to wait. You're doing it now. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, and I think Lance, for at least for me, I don't know, Kate, if you have a different perspective, I like the way you described in the beginning. It's really cultivating the mindfulness, the intentionality of this is what I'm doing right now. So it's not necessarily about stopping and doing a full recitation of something. It's more of like, aha, like I'm aware of what I'm doing in each action and moment. And I think that's what I just took away, like summarizing what I heard.
Yeah. And I'm aware that I'm a bodhisattva. I'm doing a bodhisattva activity. All the virtues are expressed by the bodhisattvas. All the negativities are expressed by the Maras, the demons.
And Lance, that was actually yesterday. I know not everyone had the benefit of our practice yesterday. When that has really helped me in the last 24 hours, like the idea of the Mara within me, like the internal battle, that has really helped me conceptualize those moments where I'm going towards non-virtue and say that's the Mara, and then make an active decision to go in the other direction. So thank you, because that was so helpful yesterday.
It's all a choice, isn't it?
I mean, it really is at any moment, like starting here, like visualizing, stop, what am I doing in my precious body in this moment? This action matters. The smallest action matters. It's like a teardrop. So yeah, it was beautiful. Thank you. Very powerful.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions about the 4 causes of samsara? Okay. Then I'm going to look at it in another way and give you the 3 causes for a human rebirth. Now, we can be reborn as an animal, we can be reborn as a hell being, we can be reborn as a hungry ghost, we can be reborn as a titan, a demigod, we can be born as a deva god. Why would we want to be born as a human being? Because the human being has the ability to recognize and to change. All the other 5 realms, the beings in those 5 realms, the psychophysical drama of being in those 5 realms, you are so absorbed with yourself that there's no room, there's no place, there's no space, there's no energy to be able to recognize your situation. But it's only as a human being that we can do that. So it's the human being who can change. So if when we pass, and we're the result of it now, that we are human beings, but we are precious human beings. Why wasn't we born in the middle of India in a parched land that can't grow any crops or anything and susceptible to all the disease or something? Or why weren't we born in a war zone and so on? Why were we born where we were and where we are now? Because of our good karma, because we have precious human life, and we need to be able to seize on that and assure that the work that we do is going to continue that continuum of rebirth. So the 3 causes for a human rebirth. Number 1 is that we are practicing moral ethics. So we have to look at this logically. We have to look at, a system of morality. What is good and bad? And if we need to write them all down, we write them all down. We've identified the 10 virtues and the 10 non-virtues. And pretty much everything can fall into those categories. But if you want to break it down even further, you certainly can do that. But to create a morality for yourself and follow that morality. That's number 1, to be reborn as a human being. The second one is to have a pure aspiration for enlightenment for all sentient beings through dedication. So what does that mean? That's a long sentence. Pure aspiration for enlightenment, that we want enlightenment, we have this real aspiration for it, a desire, but I always look at desire as having a negative connotation to it. That aspiration is more of a higher one. I mean, that's my own personal way I look at it. But nevertheless, it's having this aspiration, desire for enlightenment for other beings before my enlightenment. My enlightenment comes after other beings' enlightenment. I know I can achieve enlightenment. I've already got enlightenment. I know it's there. They don't. And I'm working to help them to realize their enlightenment. When all that is done, then I can have my enlightenment. All that builds to be able to assure that I will have that enlightenment. Not like it's a reward or something like that, but it is the work of the bodhisattva to do for others. That is on the path. That is the enlightenment. That while we're in the midst of this ocean of suffering, because the bodhisattva is operating in the ocean of suffering. So while we're doing that, we're doing it for the benefit of others through the dedication, that my life becomes a dedication for other beings, for the enlightenment of other beings. So that's the second of the 3 causes for human rebirth. And the third one is called the 6 perfections, or the 6 paramitas. And if you've been in 101 with us in months past, years past, we've talked about this. We talk about this at least once a year. the six perfections of being a human being. So one is generosity, the next one is the moral ethics, the next one is patience, the next one is perseverance, the next one is mindfulness, and the next one is wisdom awareness. So by developing those logically, committedly, devotedly, understanding how we are cultivating that, then that leads us to rebirth as a human being, and not just an ordinary human being, but a precious human being. So what do you think of that? Any comments or questions about that? Yes, Gary. Your microphone is muted, Gary.
Talk about the distinction between mindfulness and wisdom awareness, just briefly for me, if you would, please.
Well, mindfulness is the process of understanding all this phenomenal nature. So contemplation is within that, logic is in that, analysis is in that, and being mindful of what you are, who you are in that process of doing all that. So it's being present in the moment, and also recognizing that which has come before and that which is to come in the future, and making the decision really to be here now. We can't change the past. The future hasn't come. There's too many variables. All we have is now. So to be mindful of all these dynamics is what that means, and all the intellectual properties that we have in order to be able to do that. So contemplation, meditation, etc. Does that make sense? And wisdom awareness then becomes the satisfaction of that. That out of that observation, out of that mindfulness of recognizing all this thing, you are developing, or you're cultivating, you are accumulating this body of wisdom, this body of knowledge, this fundamental understanding, awareness of our true nature. Because all this is all phenomenal. We experience that in our mindfulness. We can see that, but then we can see that all that is just part of the wisdom. This wisdom awareness, we may not be perfect in that wisdom awareness, and we won't be. But to know that, to have the experience of knowing it's there, and that maybe we did have a momentary experience with it, and to be confident of that wisdom awareness, that it is there, to use, the words, we got are the words, but that there is that space that all this is hanging in. If you want to look at it as a big field of energy, and all these celestial bodies are just hanging in that field of energy. Maybe the dark matter is all this folded network of this net, this interconnected net that all these physical bodies are hanging on. And sometimes that net folds on itself and so on. And maybe all that is just a structured space. So wisdom awareness, that we are capable of that Buddha awakening. The Christ, God, Yahweh, Krishna, whatever you want to call it, it's all there. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? At least to a point, to be able to give you something to continue to contemplate upon. Because once again, all these things need to be experienced. All these thoughts need to be explored and recognized. Brendan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, I've been really contemplating a lot what you said, Lance, about, if there was an intruder in your home, what would you do? And, I'm not going to sit here and say I wouldn't protect my family, okay? In that hypothetical situation, but I get the sense of what you're saying. Buddhism is a very peaceful philosophy. And, we are saturated with violence in our world, in our country. We've got these massive weapons of death that fly over football games and do flyovers. And yes, I mean, we do need a lot more peacefulness in our hearts and in our lives and our world. And to say that, well, even protecting the innocent, violence doesn't harm the person inflicting it, that's a lie. It would not be Buddhism to say that violence is a good idea, even in self-defense, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Can we take the person down without killing them?
Sometimes, sure.
Right now it seems as though, the military police idea is just shoot the son of a gun, kill him. But is there another way of taking them down? It's clear they got to be taken down, but how are we going to do that? I've said this before, there was a great Indian philosopher, his name was Sri Aurobindo, who lived about 100 years ago, died about 100 years ago now. And he had a great following. And so when he was down in Mysore, down in Pondicherry, down in India, and he wrote a book called The Life Divine and The Divine Life, and a lot of other books and so on. And he talked about the Superman. And the Superman was a human being who had a great physical body and who developed and cultivated his health and his physical body. But he also had a keen mind, and he worked to exercise his mind and keep his mind sharp and clear and so on. But he also had a heart. And the heart was pure and had a quality of virtue to it, and a quality of compassion, loving kindness, bodhicitta, and so on, like that. And this Superman was the ideal. This became the ideal in his story of the divine life. And then in America, during the Great Depression, in the 1935 or something like that, somebody had the bright idea, hey, we need a hero, but we need a hero that is so perfect that all we can do is just write about it because there's not a living hero that's so great. Let's create a Superman. And they created a comic book called the Superman comic books, Marvel Comics, right? And here was this guy who came from another planet where he had these great powers. He had a great physical body. He had a great intellectual mind, but he also had a great heart. And the thing about him that really makes sense, that brings us to the Buddhist conclusion, is that he never killed anybody. He never drew blood. In all the comic books and all the television programs and the movies, up to and including the Man of Steel. I haven't seen the most recent Superman movies, but he never drew blood. He never killed anybody. And that was an expression of his being able to subdue evil where it is, but not to have to annihilate it, because that has a negativity built right into it. So that's a very interesting observation and plausible as an example in our lives. So I got one more quick thing if I can. What are the 4 good qualities of suffering? Does suffering have anything good about it? can we find virtue in suffering? So write this down. So the four good qualities of suffering we find through the being disheartened with it. If we're tired of being suffering, of being in suffering, if we're tired of seeing suffering, then we begin to recognize what's creating that suffering. So our arrogance becomes dispelled. We begin to take responsibility for that suffering. So that's number one, that the arrogance is dispelled. The second one is that compassion arises for those who are in cyclic existence. If we're trying to wonder what is compassion, look at some of these commercials on television where they're showing, the animals that have been locked up. They're showing the kids who have been killed in schools, and the kids who are dying because of disease, and the kids who are dying in the war zones and things like that. If that doesn't arise compassion, of course it does. So we have compassion arises for beings in cyclic existence. So the children are extreme examples of that. But we can look and see where people are suffering in so many ways. And that brings compassion to our hearts and recognize it in our intellect. The third one is that evil is shunned. Unwholesomeness begins to be shunned. You begin to make determinations. You begin to make choices not to engage, not to support, not to in any way be part of unwholesomeness. So suffering, by recognizing suffering, gives us the ability to recognize that. Otherwise, we go through what might be this enchanted life of being a deva God realm, not seeing the suffering of other beings. So through this suffering and recognize the suffering, we find this compassion, and we find the ability to be able to help those in compassion. And the fourth one is that joy is found in virtue. That we find that when we do good things, joy results. Joy results in other people's lives, and joy results in our lives. We don't have to be the one who is creating the joy. We can witness somebody else doing something good for somebody else, and we just observe it, and joy comes to our heart. So joy is found in virtue. So altogether, these four are engaging in conduct of the bodhisattva. So these four qualities of understanding suffering and recognizing suffering as a cause for us to be bodhisattva, a holy enlightened being. So thank you very much. I hope this was helpful.
It was.
Lance, I really love the last point you just made, that we can find joy in watching other people engage in virtue. I had never thought of that. And that's like a really helpful thing for me, because then I can smile at those moments when I watch it as an observer. So thank you.
When I watch television and I see somebody doing something good for somebody, I start crying. It's gotten more. I mean, years ago, I never would have done that. But now tears come to my eyes all the time when I see that kind of love being portrayed. Either it's a real thing that they're showing, or it's a dramatization. But nevertheless, it becomes real, that joy. There are tears of joy in my heart. And maybe you've had that similar experience.
I cry all the time. Yes, I'm a pervasive crier. Yes, like tears of joy. Like I tear up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't mind, then we'll do the dedication prayers. And if anybody wants to talk anymore, we can speak a few minutes. If you don't mind, Kate, would you read the dedication prayer? Would you recite that for us, please, on page 21 and 22?
Uh,
Do you have this
so
book?
the lineage dedication prayer.
The dedication
The-
prayer by Jigden Sumgun.
Oh, okay. Certainly.
Everybody recite it along with Kate, please. I'm going to turn my microphone off.
Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate root of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kate, and everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank everybody at home who is going to watch this later on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Lance. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Okay. Hope to see you again soon.
Have a good night.
Okay. Good night.
Lance, this was the most beautiful lesson tonight and very transformative for me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. You are an inspiration.
Well, thank you, Lance.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Lance.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I find your passion for. Oh, she left. I was going to say something that's there. I find her to something very inspirational. I find about her too. She's very passionate about her practice. It's just cool.
She is.
Yes, she is.
She
Yeah.
is. Yes.
All right, Joe. I'm heading out. Good night. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you, Matt.
Good night.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Are you in your car, Alex?
Yeah, I finished driving and then I was continuing listening after I arrived. So
I see. Okay.
yeah, it was a great lesson today.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us and your comments, as always, and your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your dedication.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Good night, Vikram. I hope you're still there. I see you're still spot up there. All right. Katie, see you later.
Good night, Lance.
All right. Good night. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.